Greetings to you wherever you are in the world. My name is Wendy Osborne, Senior Consultant with IAVI, and on behalf of IAVI and the Emirates Foundation, I am delighted to welcome you to this, our final session in our virtual Global Forum series. We have had 7 forums over the past 6 months and are delighted to have had over 1,800 people register for the series from over 110 countries. The COVID-19 pandemic has emphasised how volunteers as agents of change provide the practical action that builds hope and resilience, improves lives and strengthens communities. The pandemic resulted in the postponement of the October 2020 IAVI World Volunteer Conference to be hosted by the Emirates Foundation in Abu Dhabi. The conference will now be held in the autumn of 2021. However, the conference theme chosen for 2020 of volunteering together to enable change and create a better world has never been more relevant or more real. As part of the preparations for the conference, the Emirates Foundation had agreed to support the writing of 7 context papers on the conference sub-themes. Although the conference has been postponed, this project has continued. It aims to provide opportunity for greater consideration of important issues, including with relevance to volunteering and COVID-19, and to enable wider dissemination of knowledge that would add value to those supporting and developing volunteering around the world. The context papers have all been published, and with the recordings of each forum, all are available on the IAVI website. I would like to pay tribute to Professor Oscar Garcia, the author of the context paper associated with today's forum. It is an excellent piece of work and I commend it to you. We hope the forums will be of interest to volunteer involving organisations, academics, policymakers, corporations and volunteers. And now to some technical information. On the screen you will see an overview of the meeting room controls. There are 2 points to highlight. If you're having trouble with your computer's audio, try using your phone by selecting phone call under the audio tab. Most importantly, there will be a question and answer session as part of this forum. So send in your questions by using the questions tab. No need to wait to pose questions. You can write them at any time. As I said, this has been a forum series and we're now at the end, with today being the final webinar scheduled for 2020. However, we are already planning to organise more knowledge and thought leadership sessions for 2021, so please watch out for new dates. Today's forum is on the topic of volunteering 2030 new paradigms. At the end of one year, it is usual for everyone to start looking towards the next, and 2020 takes this to a new level as we start hoping for the change a COVID-19 vaccine will make to all of us across the world. It is hard to forecast what historians will say about 2020. No doubt volumes of books will be written. We are also trying to make sense of what the next decade will bring for volunteering, and that is why this forum session is so important. The world was already evolving before we had the pandemic to bring about even more change. Volunteering as a concept and an action has never been more important. We need people and citizens of every nation to create, as the IAVI vision states, a global culture of volunteering that is recognised as vital to creating a fair, peaceful, sustainable and compassionate world. We need to keep talking about volunteering and the roles volunteers do now and those they can play as we move forward, particularly in building resilience following the pandemic and delivering the 2030 vision for the Sustainable Development Goals, that no one will be left behind. I am therefore delighted that today's moderator comes with the right experience and expertise to lead us through the rest of this forum, and that today's panel brings IAVI member and partner organisations from across the world to engage with some important issues and key questions. David Stiers represents volunteers at the United Nations as coordinator of the Volunteer Groups Alliance, and he has an extensive history of nearly 3 decades working at the forefront of non-profit and civic engagement in leadership development. As Senior Director at the Points of Light Foundation, David partnered with more than 360 local volunteer centre affiliates across the country to mobilise people and resources to deliver creative solutions to community problems. He has also served as North America Board representative and treasurer of IAVI and chair of the Council for Certification in Volunteer Administration and Volunteer Alexandria. Finally, I take this opportunity on behalf of IAVI and the Emirates Foundation to thank you, David, and our other distinguished panel members for your input today. I know this is going to be a great session. It is now over to you.
Thank you so much, Wendy, and thank you to IAVI for conducting these 7 global forums on such critical topics facing volunteering today and the particular vital importance of volunteers right now more than ever. You know, globally, we just celebrated the 35th Annual International Volunteer Day just this past Saturday under the theme of Together We Can Through Volunteering, as an opportunity to promote volunteering, encourage governments to support volunteer efforts, and to really recognize volunteer contributions to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals at the local, national, and international levels. And although today is the last forum of 2020, we are looking now to a future of how volunteering is continually changing and changing the world for the better. So for today, established boundaries for volunteering are being challenged through rapidly changing societal trends, technological innovation, virtual landscapes, and a global commitment to enabling the Sustainable Development Goals for everyone, everywhere. And such a borderless state, often within countries, but sometimes across nation states, really requires more collaboration, integration, and sharing of resources to bring about the change the world needs. So to bring about this greater innovation impact, the involvement of volunteers, we really need partnerships across organizations and sectors, new ways of engaging citizens, and volunteering across borders, which makes me so excited about today's webinar and our featured presenter, Oscar Garcia, Professor of Management of Civil Society Organizations at the National University of San Martin in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And he's a former IAVI board member as well, representing the Latin America region. And he's been a former international UNESCO consultant for the National Volunteer Program of Brazil. And again, as Wendy said, after hearing from Oscar, we'll have a distinguished panel of volunteering experts from around the world to engage in conversation with you on these critical questions about volunteering in the next decade. And so please submit your questions in the question box at any time. And again, we'll look forward to an engaging conversation with you. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Oscar, and thank you for being with us today.
Good morning for me. Hi to everybody. My name is Oscar Garcia from Argentina. It is my pleasure and honor to share with you this final Global Forum session. I would like to thank very much to IAVI and the Emirates Foundation for this possibility to share with you some ideas that I wrote in the context paper, and to talk about volunteering. That's the most important thing today, to talk, to reflect, to think about volunteering. I would like to advance in the presentation, and I took a part of the idea, volunteering together to enable change and create a better world. But I think that the first part of the idea, volunteering together to enable change, is perhaps the most important of all the idea, because we need to enable change to create a better world. It is important to create changes in the world, not only related to the COVID-19 situation, but especially in important issues like peace, like development, like fight against poor. So I'm sure that we can we can make a better world if we can enable change first of all. In the following slide, I would like to share with you what the presentation is going on. This presentation will pose and cover some core issues about the development of volunteering within the next decade, especially including consideration of volunteering as part of the world that will change yet more rapidly, with new tools for global organization of action, new demands, and borderless activism. A time for exploring how volunteers as individuals and volunteering as a social movement can contribute to new ways of citizen participation. In the next slide, I would like to begin this presentation with a series of 10 ideas about how I think the world will be in the future in the year 2030. It's really difficult to know how the world will be 10 years ahead. It's difficult to know, but it's not impossible to imagine it. Mainly if we base on current reality, ideas, and reflections. So I would like to introduce you, the author, French author Jacques Attali, and also with our own vision, we can say that in the future, 2030, the world will be, and then in the next slide, we're beginning with a number of 10 ideas. Will be the world more connected than ever, maybe hyper-connected, and with an enormous amount of information circulating worldwide, not all of which will be serious or truthful. We will have more inhabitants with growing poor, migrant, and elderly populations. The number of volunteers in the world by 2030 will grow along with population, but will there be more poor people, migrants, and the elderly who become volunteers in the future? Third, the world will be more diverse, but not diversity not only in a linear cultural path, but also in the context of an intention with legal and political framing. Diversity will be a political issue in the future. Fourth, we'll have more identities, coexisting strong ones with other fluid ones. Identities that can change within the context, within the strategies, and within the results. Strong identities coexisting with fluid identities. And in the place number 5, the future will be with experienced robotics and interactive artificial intelligence installed in homes and workspaces. In the next, we can see number 6, that we will see increasing elements of our lives being ever more instantaneous. 7, we will see, even amid social tensions and world conflicts that have not ceased, illiteracy decrease globally and access to education will increase. In the world of 2030, I think that we will have more inequality on different levels, south-north, between races, and through economic development and so on. Number 9, we will see more uncertainty. The COVID-19 pandemic will be, without doubt, a strong reference in the first year of 2020-2030 decade. Uncertainty is one of the biggest challenges. How long will it last? What will the outcome be? Will it be repeated with global health threats continuing? And number 10, the future in the 2030 will be still addressing the big challenges of today, such as climate change, women's rights, racial equality, and so on. Well, those are 10 ideas that I thought and I share with you, and of course we can discuss them in this global forum of what I think the future will be and how volunteering will manage with it. I think that voluntary action always manifests a new dimension of coexistence between people. It is a channel of cultural expression and can attend to both emergency situations and complex development challenges. Volunteering is solidarity in action and is also a school of citizenship. It allows us to face the relationship with the other from a plane that combines responsibility with abundance and gratefulness. See that the others will be a key actor, a key important in this future, a key piece important in this future. In the next slide, I would like to say that volunteering must be considered and valued in its proper measure, neither for more nor for less, a significant but complementary and not central cultural expression of community life. Volunteering as a complementary activity of the humanity can be a field of consensus. In particular, dialogue volunteering can be a new language of peace. In the next slide, I would like to say that in volunteering, the future is today. 10 years before 2030, we do not have the answers, but something almost as important. We have some questions that make sense. I would like to share with you that question. There are these ones. This presentation and the context paper has articulated the need for an importance of dialogue. While there are no definitive answers, sometimes it is in articulating the right questions that we find the solutions we seek. The first of those questions is, by 2030, how can we ensure that there will be opportunities and access to all to volunteer? The second question is, what more can we do to make diversity and solidarity the hallmarks of volunteering? I will talk more about hallmarks now in a minute. Number 3, the third question is, do we need a global declaration that encompasses everything that volunteering means? Number 4, should we have universally accepted core values for volunteering? Core values are really important. Number 5, if volunteering is so fundamental to delivering global well-being SDGs of United Nations, how do we systematize, record, measure, and graph the daily pulse of a humanity that helps itself? And finally, number 6, what more can we do individually and collectively to create the borderless and transformative volunteering that delivers a fair, inclusive, equitable, peaceful world? Well, I would like to share with you these questions. Maybe we can discuss briefly some of them, if you would. And in the next, I would like to send, because of these presentations, but I continue a very few minutes sharing with you some ideas. The next, I would like to say that in my idea, it's important individual volunteering and volunteering as a social movement. The global volunteering must be thought about dynamically, taking into account the changes of a world in permanent movement. And for this, its principles and ethical foundations must be reviewed and updated. Volunteering, whatever its modality, scope, and perspective, must first promote growth in the most basic nucleus. Volunteering must generate self-esteem. That is the challenge attached to growing up. The self-esteem in the voluntary activity is really important. It's really a key situation for the volunteers. But we need to develop and to deepen in the 2030 SDGs of United Nations, because they will be neither be fully reached nor fully not reached, and that will be the challenge, to use the degree to which they are being fulfilled as a platform to reset new objectives for another decade. We are in a situation of COVID-19 that become on a planetary level, and the humanity in this planetary level, the change of care is a new expression of an old conception of solidarity, now revitalized. The one that says that with the other, either neighbor or stranger, we cannot be indifferent. Volunteering cannot be indifferent with the other. It is, however, essential to characterize volunteering with an adjective so that its concept does not turn into a vacuum. One cannot speak of volunteering in the abstract. Volunteering, turning in the void, is a dancing and happy but irrelevant spinning top. That is why I refer to the difference between a light volunteering and a transforming one. That is, volunteering that seeks to transform reality. I would like to share with you the idea of a borderless volunteering. A borderless volunteering, can we think about it in a triple perspective? First, the operational perspective, with effective projects, with action, with activities, with programs. Second, in the social perspective, with new paradigms, thinking, reflecting, sharing, as we're doing in this series of 7 forums. And the third perspective is the vital one, with a comprehensive and universal mystic. Building, living, and communicating borderless volunteering is today an unique historical opportunity to acquire a dimension of deep brotherhood. Integration dreams it, technology allows it, and global changes require it. Volunteering must be considered I repeat, and value in its proper measure, neither for more nor for less. It's a complementary but not central cultural expression of community life. Finally, I would like to use the final minutes of my presentation, and then we can share the forum, and the people can make questions, that we need active dialogue to set new frames of understanding, not only with other volunteering across the ocean, but also with neighboring partners that are participating in an deeply committed to social affairs, even if they do not call themselves volunteers. It is essential that the international networks of volunteers and the great global actors like UNV, IAVE, and so on, and other NGOs, convene volunteers and small community organizations in every corner of the world to begin permanent, focused, organized, and credible, big or small size rounds of dialogue about the 17 SDGs of United Nations and other important key issues. Those dialogues must be recorded, synthesized, shared, and turned into commitments of understanding and action. We need to use dialogues as steps towards a new platform for volunteering discussion. So, in conclusion, in an attempt to stimulate thoughts and ideas, my work on the context paper has positioned volunteering as not merely important but a vital component of social well-being. The idea that volunteering is a global movement, that it should operate as a borderless concept, is about recognizing and emphasizing that solidarity is the key to future success. Solidarity that enables and empowers individuals through volunteering, whoever and wherever they are, to transform their lives and the lives of others to simple yet profoundly make a positive difference. The questions could be, can a paper itself achieve the great challenges to promote, support, and celebrate volunteering? I don't know, but I know that the global forums like this one and the other 6 that were done are really important to share ideas and to put volunteering in the center of discussion. I would like to thank you very much for this opportunity, and I pass David, the moderator, to continue with the global forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oscar, for those very thought-provoking questions and ideas and concepts as we think about volunteering for the next decade to 2030, which is the current deadline for the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And I want to now welcome onto the stage our wonderful panelists from around the world, and we'll introduce them. First, we'll have Nicole Cirillo, who is the Executive Director of IAVE and has been in the position for just a year, but thank you, Nicole, for IAVE's hosting of these webinars. Also, I'd like to invite Boram Kim, who's the coordinator of the Plan of Action for volunteering into the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development for the United Nations Volunteers. Welcome, Boram. I'd also now like to welcome Leila Sejek from Croatia, who's serving as the current president of the Center for European Volunteering and is CEO of the Croatian Volunteer Development Center. Welcome, Leila. Next, I'd like to invite Samuel Toure, who's a project assistant for VSO International in Sierra Leone and also the coordinator of the Volunteer Involving Organizations Network in Sierra Leone. Welcome, Samuel. And then finally, I'd like to welcome Mohammed Al-Hassani, who's the Director of Leadership and Empowerment at the Emirates Foundation in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, and is overseeing the Takadov Voluntary Social Program. And then finally, I'd like to welcome Nantini from Malanan from Thailand, who is a founding member of the Volunteer Spirit Network. And so welcome all of you to join Oscar on the stage. And Oscar provided some very relevant questions of thinking about volunteering in the next decade. And we actually would like the audience to help us prioritize which of these questions you would like our panelists to tackle first. We have about 45 minutes and a lot of ground we still want to cover, but we'd love your guidance of where we should begin. So I'll ask Jessica to begin our poll. And what I'd like for you to do is vote on which question, again, you would like the panels to first discuss. We'll try to get to all 5 in the next 45 minutes. But should we start with how can we ensure access to volunteering for all? Or how do we prioritize diversity and solidarity? Third is, do we need a global declaration for volunteering? Fourth, should we agree on a global set of core values? And finally, can we record the impact of people on the SDGs? So pick which one you think would be your priority for the panel to first discuss. And then once we get our poll results, we'll ask our panelists to respond to that first question. Again, if you have your own questions, feel free to add those to the questions box, and we will look forward to taking those as well. But wanted to sort of get us started with these questions here. So again, make your selection while the poll is open, and then in a moment, Jessica will close the poll and share the results. Okay, so it looks like about a third said to start with the first question of how can we ensure access to volunteering for all, and then we'll move on to the second question around how to prioritize diversity and solidarity. And it looks like the third and fifth would be next, and then we'll end hopefully in time with the core values. So again, we'll start with this question of how can we ensure access to volunteering for all? And I open it up to the panelists. Who would like to begin?
Yeah, David, I'm happy to start.
Thanks, Mohammed.
Yeah, I think I want to share something happened in UAE during the COVID-19, which is it was an amazing approach from the government to make sure that everyone can have a chance to volunteer during COVID-19, which is the main thing that they establish a committee, which is that committee will make sure to have all the organizations that they are working on volunteerism to be under one umbrella, which is we give the chance to everyone to participate. This is the first thing. The second, they make sure the technology are there, which is the virtual volunteering, which I think virtual volunteering is very important for future. A lot of people that because of the time, they cannot volunteer physically, so which is the virtual volunteering is very important. The second thing, skill-based volunteering, it should be part of the volunteering in the future, which is here we need the support, which is we add the corporate volunteering. All the corporate should be part of the to volunteer and support. The last thing, which I think we need also the education system to support volunteering in schools and university, Now what they did here in UAE, it's mandatory for students to volunteer to graduate in schools and in university. A lot of people could be against it because you should do something by yourself. But we found after 5 years now that a lot of students in the beginning they don't know about volunteering. When they make it mandatory, they have completed a big number of years on participating on volunteering. And the last thing, for the last 3 years, they established an online portal, which is to make sure anything volunteer, from training, from opportunities, from entities, all of them under one portal. And here even we can extract a real data that we know how many volunteers we have in UAE, how many skill-based volunteering. So the opportunity there is now equally for everyone. And from there we can then filter all the volunteers and to give access to everyone to participate in their area and what they want and what they love to do.
Great. Thank you so much, Mohammed. Those are all really incredible ways that we can engage volunteers in new ways through virtual and skill-based than we could not that many years ago. Who else would like to respond again to this, providing access to volunteering for all?
Can I go, David?
Please.
So yeah, very interesting presentation from Oscar and also answers from Mohammed. I want to take us back to the survey, global survey we conducted at UNV earlier this year to see where volunteering contributes to the SDGs, to the Sustainable Development Goals. And we had actually overwhelming number of responses from over 21,000 respondents. And actually 99% of those respondents said volunteering is important to deliver the SDGs. Maybe this comes as very natural piece of information to many of us because we all are very familiar with the value of volunteering and how great work volunteers have been contributing to a diverse sector of development challenges and issues and etc. But for me, what's new here is we've been quite weak as a sector to be able to present in figures and numbers and as a piece of evidence. So with on that note, the top 6 Sustainable Development Goal areas that came strongly based on the contribution of volunteering was good health and well-being, as Oscar mentioned, quality education, zero hunger, no poverty, gender equality, and 6th was climate action, for example. So for me, the scale and scope are there to recognize and to further support and engage volunteering, but probably it's much more about consolidating what we know based on these facts and evidence, and also advocate for it, for volunteering opportunities to be able to diversify in terms of areas of action, hopefully going beyond the 6 SDG areas and across all 17 SDG areas. So this advocacy factor for both who want to volunteer and also who'd like to benefit from volunteering as they face a number of different issues in their community lives would be important in terms of access to volunteering.
Great, thank you so much, Forum. And I want to share from one of our colleagues that from the UK on the call, in the question of access to volunteering is particularly important for individuals with disabilities because it can be a huge benefit to skills development to improve employment and access to longer-term economic independence, as well as socializing and well-being benefits. In the United Kingdom, there is no formal recognition of support needed to access volunteering opportunities, such as sign language interpreters for the deaf. So again, how do we put together the infrastructure, not only just to ask people to volunteer, but how do we actually physically make it possible for them to volunteer so we'll provide access to all? Who else would like to respond to this question?
I think I could just continue with what you were just saying, if I may.
Please,
So,
Leila.
hello. Yeah, thank you. Hello from Europe. I'm so glad that Oscar has raised some very, very important questions for the next decade. And certainly one is the diversity and the inclusiveness that we are trying to accomplish in volunteering as well. I just want to say that volunteering is not in the bubble. It's not happening in the bubble. It's happening in the context of everything else that's happening in our societies. And this question is very much connected with the level of inclusivity of our society, with the level of inequality. And so I think the first precondition is for volunteering to be very much aware of what is happening in the society in order to be able to respond to the needs in the society. So when we talk about access of volunteering for all, we have to know which social groups are socially excluded or in the risks to be excluded or deprived. So I think that also takes a lot of needs assessment from our volunteer involving organizations. And yes, I agree with the question that came from UK, or the comment that came, that we need to invest a lot in the awareness of our volunteer involving organizations and their capacity to reach out proactively and reach to that groups and challenge the stereotypes on who can volunteer. So I think the proactivity and the awareness is very much very much important in achieving the inclusiveness. In Europe, of course, I'm saying all of this from the perspective of Europe. We have, in the past decade, we have invested a lot in talking about inclusive volunteering and investing a lot in delivering some know-how, trying to equip our organizations to reach out and of course, and involve volunteers that are coming from the groups I have mentioned. But we also have to be aware that we need to support our policymakers to make more effort in supporting these organizations to fight with barriers, because sometimes, or in many cases, it needs an additional effort from the organizations to move the barriers and involve everybody in volunteering.
Great, thank you, Leila. And again, when the United Nations set the 2015 Agenda 2030 and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, so the tagline is to leave no one behind. And so I think that how we make sure we leave no volunteers behind in the next decade of giving that access to everyone to volunteer is critically important. Who else would like to address this question?
So, thank you so much, Bashir. And I want to just continue where Leila stopped with regards to the aspect of social exclusion, which is more common in promoting volunteering whenever we actually do our engagements. Especially we're looking at the area for informal volunteering when engaging them, because if we are focused in the larger world, we're looking at lack of formal volunteering, which actually look at some kind of policies, areas, and kind of professional background. And we do have a lot of informal volunteering as well happening in the global south and as well as around the world, which is I can agree with Boram. A lot has not been reported, a lot has not been accounted for actually. So creating an access or making an environment where we have making volunteering accessible for all. Again, we have to invest in the slogan that you mentioned just, and we are looking at how do we ensure we leave no one behind. These are kind of critical questions which we have to look into, and as well as looking at an enabling environment where we're looking at how do we set up our policies, what are some of the focus on this policy that promotes or kind of give access to hard to reach areas. I can make a very good example here. We have a model under VSO that talks about volunteering for development, which I can see a very rich model that's actually engaged, giving access to community to promote volunteer for development programs within their communities. And our specific focus on that project, especially for this part, we have been able to lay more emphasis in communities that are hard to reach, perhaps even like the COVID-19 response, where we thought a lot of communities which we are not engaged in their time, we are able to mobilize their own efforts in their own community to promote their own cause in the fight against COVID-19. So this kind of opportunities is mostly where most of the communities we are actually not most of the time not included, and then we do not actually, most of the time, do not invest more into informal volunteering to gather their work, to see how we could be able to create more opportunities where we can expand their work beyond where they are operating. So if we are to talk about access to all, we need to look at inclusion, we need to look at the aspect of diversity into all of our engagements, ensuring that we're able to create a better world where everyone realizes the impact of volunteering in their society and themselves.
Great, thank you so much, Samuel, for all the efforts you're doing in Africa and Sierra Leone's resonating across the world. So Nicole or Nancy, what's your thoughts on this question?
From the paper, I totally agree with Professor Garcia that the entry point of engaging volunteers must be wide and welcoming. And success in volunteering depends on an environment which enables it to happen. Results require more than encouragement. Serious planning and the system to implement those plans are required for a volunteer sector to thrive equitably. And with all groups having the opportunity to contribute meaningfully and CSOs having the training and system to make the most of the social capital available for their work. And it requires mechanisms that encourage and enable participation in decision-making processes. And in-house services are delivered and in monitoring those services. And it requires a shared space that is open to all. That's my question.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yes, thank you, David, and thank you to David and Oscar and all of my fellow panelists. I think just the beauty of going last is you can keep your comments quite short because everyone has sort of said what you had intended to say. But I'll just say this very quickly, that I think the beauty of volunteering is that in fact it is open to all and that there are no barriers whatsoever when you turn your compassion into action. So I think part of this question is about making sure we have a frame that values all of the ways people volunteer, and that we're not being too narrow or too prescriptive about what constitutes volunteering. And really to recognize and lift up and celebrate the many, many, many ways people act, whether it's through their voices or their time or their talent or their treasure. All of these are ways of service and ways of volunteering. And I think it's really important to have that broad frame. I think about Generation Z globally and how much attuned they are to using their voice or frankly their purchasing power as ways and means of putting their values into action and as how they might define volunteering. So yes, we need to be intentional and we need to make sure we do everything that the panelists before me have said. But also, I think, again, it's about how we frame and broaden the frame around how we define ways of service.
Great, thank you, Nicole. And in thinking about the second question, how do we prioritize diversity and solidarity? And one of the questions that's come in from the audience is, and this may be specifically for you, Oscar, can you expound more on your concept of borderless volunteering? And for any panelists to think about this idea of borderless volunteering, how does borderless volunteering affect cultural diversity or nuances in cultures, for instance? So again, this idea of prioritizing diversity and solidarity and volunteering, and maybe this borderless volunteering concept. Any comments or reactions from any of the panelists?
I can just say just a piece of my personal story. I actually started almost 30 years ago, being a refugee myself, volunteering with refugees, coordinating the groups of international volunteers that came to give their support to the refugees coming from Bosnia and Croatia at the time. And for me, that was my first meeting with the concept. And why would people from all around the world would come and just be there for the people, listen to their stories. And that was priceless priceless support to those people, that somebody who hasn't been affected and wasn't even aware of what was happening was coming and showing the compassion and empathy. So from that story, I just want to emphasize how important it is to develop this concept as, of course, as much as we can, because we all know it depends on so many other factors, the government support, the financial support, but it is important. It's cross-border, but it's cross-cultural, and it builds multiculturality, and it widens the space of understanding each other and seeing each other more clearly. I think that's very important.
Great, absolutely. And volunteering is a great way to break down differences and bring people together. Any other comments or thoughts again on this question? How do you prioritize diversity and solidarity, this concept of borderless volunteering?
David, I guess I'll say something certainly about diversity and inclusion. And I think one of the things I've always been taught in this regard is to put the work at the center, right? To sort of, we often volunteer because we want to help or we want to be of service. But I think it's really important to remember that there are people and communities who are already there and already best enabled and equipped to find and implement solutions to the problems that they face. So I think putting the work first, but also remembering to listen to people, just as Leja has said, to really respect and listen to our partners and to really let them lead us, to make sure that we're acting in concert with what their best desires. Just a quick personal story. I was doing some work in Haiti after the earthquake there, and we went down to build centers and to sort of help the Haitian people and our communities and the people we were working with rebuild. And the people from who came from largely North America, thought it was really best to build medical centers and schools first. But their insistence was that they build a soccer pitch, a football pitch. And as much as we disagreed with that, we listened to them. And what was important about that soccer pitch is that it became a place for families and communities to connect and to share and to rebuild their community. And it ended up being the right choice. Had we built that medical center, it wouldn't have worked. And my lesson from that is you have to listen to people on the ground. And that's how you really enable diversity and inclusion in volunteering in this space.
Great, thank you, Nicole.
Maybe I can come in building on what Nicole said in terms of, diversity and inclusion. I mean, maybe not so much about volunteering, but I think it cuts across the board. Like, I recently took a diversity inclusion course out of my own interest and passion to structuralize my thinking in a better way. And I heard this quote, diversity is to invite someone to a party. And then inclusion is to invite the person to dance with. And then actually belonging is actually the person wants to stay longer because she or he really feels part of this group or party, the event. So this, I think, I wanted to share with the audience and with the panel. So having this in mind, I think I want to talk about briefly two different aspects of diversity. One, I think many panel members before me highlighted, diversity in terms of who volunteers, including people with disabilities, young people. Also, we should not forget senior citizens, who need still be driven with a sense of purpose and etc., and have a lot of skills and experiences to contribute. All kinds of people. And also, I recently read the statistics from the World Bank. There are 1 billion people around the globe who don't have a legal identity in paper, but they all own a smartphone, and there are many ways to engage in the causes and issues that they care about across the borders. So how do we factor into the actions taken by this large group of people, for example? But my second aspect that has not come out maybe strongly as of yet is the diversity in volunteering practices themselves. So nowadays, as Oscar's presentation covered, the world is changing, the contexts are changing, development landscape is changing. There are a lot of issues interconnected across borders. One good example is climate action, Fridays for Future among young students. Also going back to the question from the audience in terms of addressing cultural diversity, I think we should respect at the bottom of everything cultural diversity. I think it's not arguable, it's not debatable in my point of view. But many issues actually provoke us to think about the common value as humanity. Like when we talk about volunteering, yeah, we want to help build the trust among people. It's considered mutual aid, it's service to others and to myself, to oneself, ability to connect as a human at different levels. So the issues are not restricted by the geographical border. I think issues are much more interconnected, borderless. So, and also issues are more cause-based, or it's about environment, it's about racial injustice, and sometimes it's one-off. But I think these actions are very meaningful, impactful, and they should be taken into account in our research, in our further study when we talk about how volunteering can contribute to solve, address development challenges in the world.
Great, thank you so much, Borm. Any other reactions or comments before we move on to maybe the next question?
I may try to add some ideas around solidarity from my own understanding. In overall, I think human relationship is the heart of volunteering, because through volunteering, people join with others to organize, share solutions, or reach out to assist others. And with this right condition, volunteering is potentially contributed to creating solidarity. And volunteering can and foster inclusion of marginalized or vulnerable groups, identifying their needs, ensuring the relevance of solutions, and helping to build solidarity at scales from the local to the global. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Mohammed?
Yeah, David. Just I want to share experience that something we did here in UAE, that we are a small country. We have more than 200 nationalities. The population is 10 million, but if we go to the local, to the Emirati, we are almost 1 million. A lot of religions are here. So what the country did, they established a ministry for tolerance, which is we work closely with them to implement different opportunities for volunteering. So then when we are working with them, we found that we start to have different religions to work on different areas to support each other. And we know each religion what they want. We have some Christian, they are supporting Muslim during Ramadan. And then we have the opposite things. And during Christmas, we have a lot of Emirati, they are supporting Christians and Christmas. What I want to reach here, that diversity, I think that we need just to have people to try it, to be together. Then you will find that people, they start to support each other, the thing that really they need it, because if we don't have that connection or that umbrella that they will get everyone under one umbrella and support each other, it will be difficult to have that diversity in different opportunities. A lot of them, when you go to volunteering, you'll find a lot of groups have their own community and they are doing their own things. So we need someone to work as to connect everyone together and to have work on different things.
Great, thanks, Mohammed. Samuel, any other final comments?
I think it's just aligned with what Melanon has just said around looking at the relationship with a people-to-people relationship. How does it actually cherish the work on the ground, and how does that help to build up diversity and solidarity in our work going further, which is much of a key on much of the project that we actually worked on. What the volunteers been saying, okay, they come here to just the work itself, but when they go to the community, the kind of the diversity of the culture, how they see lives within that community, when they adapt, they find out that the project, the people themselves accept what exactly is being taken to them, and the kind of relationship exists. And after the project span, and that they tend to continue with that kind of, because they're able to like work with the people in line with their own diversity. We're able to we don't want to just force them to do our part, but we have to like see what's best for them. How do they accept it in their own diversity? That kind of in solidarity way, ensuring that there is this sense of acceptance and in terms of culture. How do I call it? How do we ensure that we put ourselves into their own culture? For example, like we've got the ICS program where we have volunteers coming up from across the world to various part of the communities to work. You will see European volunteers meeting up with the African volunteers, but you will hardly know whether it will be different there, because there is this level of merging together where they worked and they see the visions and the missions of the project itself, and that actually helps to create impact, and people like to be able to like interact and understand how they can move further on that. So I actually agree with Melanie on kind of how do we strengthen and looking at our relationship, people to people relationship.
Great, thank you so much, Samuel. And the next question I'd like to address is actually the last of, can we record the impact of people on the SDGs? And one of our audience members even suggested, would it be useful to have some sort of universal SMS, some sort of text messaging based system for registering volunteering related commitments and recognizing everyone equally with an SDG related digital badge portfolio? You know, what would you think about the practicality of implementing a global commitment-based nudging system that affects and tracks behavioral outcomes by volunteers and their beneficiaries? And so I'd love to get your sense of how we could actually, again, measure this impact of our volunteers, particularly on the SDGs. And are the SDGs being talked about in your volunteering community? Are you actually tying the work that you're doing to one or more of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, so that there's showing what we're doing at a small local community level actually is feeding up to a much more larger global initiative?
May I try?
Please.
Okay, this is quite difficult question, but I believe that we can do it by having the right tool, which is applicable with the nature of our volunteer service. So I'm very glad that UNV develops a toolkit of volunteering as an SDG accelerator. Maybe our colleague from UNV can extend about this toolkit, but I find it very, very useful. It provides guidance for strategically engaging and integrating volunteering into development plans and strategies in every level. And they provide a series of steps and tools that users can adapt to their own setting to help us identify, develop, support, scale, or amplify volunteering solutions to important SDG-related challenges within our own context. So I find it very useful for implementing SDG to volunteering.
I can just add also, of course, impact measurement is a big subject, and we've been talking about that a lot. When it comes to SDGs, well, of course, government could do more to prioritize how do we refer to SDGs. First of all, to raise awareness on SDGs through our educational system. That would be very much of help, but they can also prioritize that in their national statistics in order to collect some of the data. When it comes to civil society organizations all over the world, it would be nice to use the technology to create one place where we can all upload and share what some of the results and the impact that we can measure through the project that we do in our communities in that way we could have some global picture, and that would be a nice way to share and collect the data.
Great. And Borm, we're getting questions about how we can find the toolkit.
Yeah, I've been quiet on purpose, partially because also we've been always interesting to hear different thoughts and existing approaches, not just by UNV, because UNV takes a quite particular approach, if I can put it that way. As Lelia mentioned, we collaborate much with the National Statistics Office to actually come up with a statistical data in terms of how people volunteer. So we're collaborating with the International Labour Organization, who actually developed a handbook on measuring the volunteer work, for example, and it was updated in recent years as well, and we are further collaborating, for example. But this is much about measuring probably the economic contribution of volunteering. I think also this is a limitation, and we can do more than this, because volunteering, as we have been talked about in this forum, it's quite complex, it's quite human-centered, and etc. So there are some thinking and initiatives by a number of partners together with UNV, how we can broaden this scope of measuring towards the impact. But first, I think we need a robust data set in collaboration with the statistical office to have official statistics to begin with, to build on our further initiatives as well. In terms of the acceleration metrics that Anne mentioned, we looked at, in the interest of time, I'll be very brief, but we can also share the material afterwards. We looked at some of the key dimensions of volunteering, like innovation, partnership, social solidarity, all that have been mentioned as key attributes of volunteering. And also we looked at the existing pressing global challenges, such as inequalities, climate change, poverty, and etc. And we kind of created a matrix to see which dimension cuts across multiple challenges. So it's not like one trait of volunteerism addresses inequality, a certain aspect of inequality. It's quite, pressing challenge. It's quite a complex challenge to address. Volunteering alone cannot resolve it, but we can highlight in a better, more evidence-based manner that, social solidarity does. For example, okay, they're able to connect with others at multiple levels, also across borders. And then this is how it affects addressing inequalities in Argentina, for example, but also maybe it can be revised, tailored in another context in another part of the world. So it much talks about or relies on the multiplier effect that volunteering brings in. So it's not just one problem for one solution, but, let's rely on what volunteering can bring in this domino effect per se. But of course, it's quite a complex task. And so, yeah, I think first we need to work with official agencies to have a solid national data set on who volunteers and how it's captured. But also, I want to go back to our earlier point that whatever impact is measured, whichever it is measured, it should be done in a culturally appropriate way in each country context, because impact measurement, we are all on it, very curious, and I think the whole SDG world will be also very interested if we make it right. But it cannot be just one size fits all, and also, yeah, people-driven manner as well. Over.
Great, thank you, Borman. At unv.org, would that be the best website for people to start exploring to get the information, the toolkit?
No, I think lately we have a knowledge portal on volunteerism, so it will be knowledge.unv.org. So we also have latest knowledge products, including measurement guidance tools as well.
Great, thank you so much. And I'll just invite anyone else who would like to share any final reflections on this concept of measurement and how we can move from bringing the focus to outcomes rather on processes. Yes, Samuel.
Yeah, I think I'm just coming to continue perhaps. When we were just looking at some key points, recording the impact of of people and the SDGs. But I know it's quite difficult to get those evidences at this point, but I think we need to take into consideration if we don't actually get any global research and evidence, or just the volume and significant contribution of to national development goals and economy. Perhaps we're also looking at another point where we understand who are volunteers, because I remember there's a kind of questions that keep rising up. Who do we actually call volunteers? Having the database clearly reflects the typology, and volunteers sets the basis which measurement will be feasible and this kind of ways. And then we have to look at the topology ranges from one given amount to someone spending a few hours a day for a period of time. Like building on the policy and plan environments as well is also a key. And also we can see if we can develop a clear indicator for measurements. That as well could be a very good way we start. And as well as we need to look at invest in volunteer capacity development on a minimum standard for responsible and impactful volunteering, so that they feel recognized and become encouraged and protected while volunteering. Especially, we can as well get much of this and using the global standard, which actually provide this kind of standard, and now we be able to record some of these things. So getting the impact, we could start from that point, and as well we be able to capture a much impact with evidence on people towards the SDG.
Great, thank you, Samuel. Mohammed, Oscar, any final words from either of you?
Yeah, just a small thing, a quick one, that measuring the impact in any social activities is not easy. Always you need to have the right partners with you that they will help you, especially when you want to measure the quality instead of only quantity. Quantity could be easy from our side as a volunteering organization, but to measure the quality, always you need the right partner there. As the colleagues here mentioned, that we need also the government to be part of it. We need to have somehow all the volunteering work to be linked to the vision of the country, vision of the city. So we need to have that part there. So always we need to have the right partner. For example, if I will do any social activity or any volunteering work on environment, I need to have the Ministry of Environment. I need to have the environment agencies to be there, because at the end, whatever I'm doing, they will measure the impact for me and they will give me the outcome for what I'm doing.
Great, thanks, Mohammed.
David, just quickly, and I will do this in 30. I will do this in 30 seconds. I think all of this is incredibly important, and I am a huge believer in data. And to demonstrate the value of volunteering is essential. But I also want to ask those of you who are listening, who are funders or governments or corporations out there, you know, this scheme is very complicated. It is multivariable. It will take time to build. We already have a really strong narrative about the value of volunteering and about the impact of volunteering. So, you know, I wouldn't want that to be an excuse, the lack of strong metrics, to continue to invest on behalf of governments, corporations, and funders, even without that data that is proving hard and fast of the impact. You know, let's continue to invest, and let's make these investments as we figure out these more complicated schemes, because they are going to take time, effort, and deep partnership, as Mohammed has just mentioned.
Great, thanks, Nicole. And Oscar, as you can see, your paper generated lots of discussion and perspective. Any final words from you?
I'm really glad about that.
Great. Well, again, thank you all to our panelists and each of you who have participated today. We've heard, again, how volunteering is such a key strategy, and especially now with COVID-19, and the real transformative power volunteering can really energize this decade of action coming up if properly championed. You know, right from its design, the 2030 Agenda for the Sustainable Development Goals has been of the people, by the people, and for the people. And volunteering really allows all countries and all of us to ensure that this people-centered approach really continues in the implementation and helps our communities face their current and future crisis situations. We conclude trusting that you have seen and found hope in the power of everyday people and in each one of you as volunteers to change the world. As we conclude, please complete the evaluation form, and I want to thank IAVE for this entire 7-part series on global volunteering, and I'll now turn it over to Nicole for a closing word.
Thank you, David. And it has indeed been a very challenging year for all of us for so many reasons, but through it all, we've really seen and heard stories of compassion, innovation, and really, frankly, grit and determination to act in service to help our communities respond. Back in March, when we designed this series, we chose the title Volunteering Together to Enable Change and Create a Better World. And over the past 6 months, we have indeed done just that. We've shared and learned together about inspiring practices that enable truly catalytic volunteering and volunteering that can and does create a better world. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to the authors of the 7 papers, to the presenters, all of the presenters today and throughout the series, to you, David, and to the moderators throughout the series, and indeed to the people who attended these sessions. Your contribution has made this series incredibly successful. And thank you also to Wendy and Jess and the entire IAVE team who have worked so hard to put this together. It's not as easy as it might seem. And of course, thank you to Ahmed Al-Shamsi and to Mohammed Hosseini and the entire team at Emirates Foundation for working together in partnership. Stay tuned for 2021 and have a lovely balance to this year.